Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our Humph podcast. Today, we will be talking about a new service that we're offering called a Workplace Wellbeing Audit. So just a quick introduction to the lovely ladies that have joined the call today. We have Catherine Pegner, who is the CEO of GV Health. Welcome, Cass.
Thank you.
And we have Sarah Smith, who is one of our senior people partners from the Humph team, as well as Lisa, who you will all know from our podcast before, who is my business partner. So today's session is talking about workplace wellbeing.
Yeah, so I guess why don't we kick off with a question? So what is workplace wellbeing and why do we think it's so important? Sarah, why don't you, Smith that is, because you've both got the same name, why don't you kick us off with that?
Yeah, I think so workplace wellbeing to me is very much about creating an environment where everyone is able to thrive and do their best and perform at their best. And I think from my perspective, since COVID, mental health and wellbeing has become spoken about so much more in companies, which is amazing, which is great, but I think there's still quite a long way for us to go. So I think for me, yeah, it's very much about creating an environment where everyone can thrive.
Yeah, Cass, what about you? Anything that you want to add to
that? I think it's important for us particularly because actually as an SME who did a huge growth spurt during COVID, that actually we've changed dramatically since then. And although we've always had an open plan office and you think that you are hearing everything and you know what's going on, actually that's not the case at all. So it's a risk that you can fall into, that you think you know what's happening, and in fact this has been, for us, this was hugely important, and we wanted to know post-COVID that actually everyone, how they were doing. I mean, that in itself was really important because it was such a huge upheaval, and I think from a mental well-being we recognised that it did affect a lot of people in a lot of different ways, having worked at home for 2 years and then coming back into the office environment.
And I think there are so many different components to workplace wellbeing, right? And a lot of it was impacted by COVID, and then obviously the economic shifts that have happened more recently and the cost of living. I think we have to recognise that a lot of people think that wellbeing is simply that mental health component of well-being, and perhaps, you know, how you're feeling physically, but actually it's a much broader sense. And I think there's a really fine line between what the company can do to support that and the personal accountability that we all have, because we all have different things going on in our life, and it's, you know, it's trying to educate and make people aware of the different components, make sure it's more transparent, but equally know where the company can contribute and support, which I hope our audit will help with, as well as encouraging others to take accountability for their own well-being. I can include my husband in that.
Yeah, and I think one of the key things is, which you both alluded to there, is there's not just a good and a bad. There's not good and a bad place. There's everything in between as well. And so that's quite a challenge for companies. As you were just saying there, I think in terms of some people are really open and they share how they're doing and what would help for them. Other people just might not quite know, or they're just not as vocal. So it's very hard for companies to actually understand how they're doing from a workplace wellbeing perspective, let alone measure it, but actually how they can have the most impact, how they can actually impact the workplace wellbeing, I suppose, and ultimately employees' wellbeing as well.
Yeah, and absolutely. I think just picking up on the point around what is it, and I think a lot of people think it's physical and mental, and probably don't really see the scope being any more than that. But you've got psychological safety, you've got social, you've got environmental. Like, there's so much to it now, I think, for businesses, that being able to understand, and also culture plays a massive part in the wellbeing organisation, the culture that you have and that you've grown. So I think just to have that kind of audit probably points people to things that they perhaps at times just would not have considered that was part of the well-being that you see in the workplace.
Absolutely. So, Cass, we had a quick chat. Well, look, you and I work together at GV Health anyway, Indeed. So we're old pals. But I think, the well-being at GV Health, why is it as important? Why do you think it's important for the business?
Well, apart from stating the obvious, I think the answer is a happy team is a productive team. But I actually think that, especially as when you're growing and you've got more people, the dynamic changes. You've got different departments that need to work together. We've gone from a very flat structure to a very different and complicated structure. And I think it's really important to make sure that we are understanding everybody's needs, and needs have changed dramatically. I mean, in addition to that, because we've moved to hybrid working, so we're in 3 days a week as opposed to 5 days, there is less contact, or in some cases, some departments are going so they can all choose when they come in. So you can miss people for quite a couple of weeks. So I think in itself is actually important to have an overall, and in this case it was anonymous, audit, which enabled everyone to sort of be able to speak up and feedback what they wanted to.
Yeah, absolutely.
So hugely important. Yeah.
No, definitely. And I think we all agree well-being in the workplace is super important, and I think I think we've kind of established that. But I guess a question is, how do you see the future of well-being support evolving or changing in the workplace? Because it's relatively new in terms of the way that we've started to talk about it and the importance that we've put on it. So I don't know, Sarah, you've obviously done lots of work around this. I wonder what's your thoughts? How do you think it's going to evolve in the workplace in the coming years?
Yeah, I think if you sort of, it's changed already, I think, with COVID. I think COVID massively put it onto everyone's agenda for all the reasons that you're talking about there, Cass, with the hybrid. It comes to hybrid working, but before that, the loneliness and everything. But before that, roll back sort of 10 years, and I think where companies were with well-being, or even 5 years, a bit before 5 years ago, was very much about the physical environment of the workplace. So maybe like Beer Friday, it's about making employees happy. So foosball tables or Beer Friday or something like that, and then just making sure that there's an EAP so that employees have that as like a backup, and then pretty much well-being was sort of ticked off. I think where we're at now, it's come such a long way. It's so individual, based on the company, and potentially the industry, the company's working within, but also on an individual employee level. Everybody's needs around their well-being is different, so one size just doesn't fit all anymore. No. So I think it's about companies really understanding that, and it's far deeper than those physical environment factors. They really don't have a massive impact. It's the day-to-day, the things that are affecting people in their work, that are stopping them from getting something done, or a difficult relationship with somebody and how that's dealt with by the company. So I think it's a far deeper level now, and I think companies are starting to see that. I think we're understanding that a lot better. But also starting to talk about and going into detail more on specific topics that are affecting like groups of people. I think we're talking about that far more, like the menopause, or neurodiversity, and understanding that, not just the line managers or HR, but also colleagues, and how we can basically, as I said before, so how we're getting that environment so everybody can thrive as individuals rather than as a mass group, what makes people happy on a Friday or whatever. So I think that's where we're going from my perspective.
It is complex, isn't it? And I think that's the complexity is increased, and I think that employers find it more difficult to navigate that on an individual basis. What can you put in place so that everybody feels that their well-being is looked after without the nuances? And I think that's really tough, and hopefully the audit helps companies kind of weed through that in terms of what is meaningful, what does the team want, what is being asked for, and it can be as simple as as Cass knows, a water cooler, all the way through to a benefit change, or it can be something different.
Yeah, definitely. And I was thinking, One of the things that I think in the last few years, engagement has been such a big thing, hasn't it? We talk about employee engagement, we talk about culture, we talk about culture, eating strategy for breakfast, because those things have started to be much more important in the workplace and for businesses to be successful. But for me, I sort of think that well-being probably drives engagement, and actually for a company to be really successful commercially and as a place where people work, so people focused, how important is engagement? Well, it's super important. So well-being is just going to drive that. And how do you know where you are if you don't measure it? So I think the audit is your ability to measure to enable you to improve. So for me, those things are super important.
Yeah. For us, I think measuring it, that's the point. We could say generally we thought things were okay, but actually you got so much detail and stuff to work on, which I think is fundamental, which you'll never get without something like this. And Sarah organised it so brilliantly, because actually not only explaining it to me what was going to happen, but implementing it and everything else meant that actually it was terribly smooth. It was done at a time that worked for us in terms of not coinciding with financial end of year or whatever. And, you know, we got a lot, and I can't remember, it was something like 26 were sent out, and I think you got 23, which I think speaks volumes, really.
Yeah.
So high engagement with it.
That's brilliant.
Really good. So
no, it was very good.
Yeah. So we've mentioned the audit a few times. So Sarah, what is the Workplace Wellbeing Audit?
So the Workplace Wellbeing Audit, how did it come about? I think for us, what we've just spoken about, and we've just been speaking about how hard it is for companies to know where to focus, what's going to have an impact. There is so much that companies could do, and some of the obvious stuff does sit at that surface level. So for us, it was about developing something that could help companies highlight where they can make a difference, how they can understand where they sit at the moment. Is it good? Is there quite a big room for improvement? So understanding that, and then focusing in on how they make those improvements, which areas, what does that look like? So the audit itself is based on a framework which ultimately looks at 6 factors that we feel are important to workplace well-being. So starts with sort of leadership at the heart of that. And with every company, they act as role models, and a lot comes down from them in terms of setting the tone for the company. It looks at the management, so my manager, so what the interactions are like there, how well they're managed. Relationships, so their relationships with colleagues, whether they're healthy relationships, how conflict is dealt with within the company as well. The work itself, so in terms of does that person have a clear understanding of the expectations on them? That links into well-being a lot, so understanding what's expected. Support, so it touches on support as well, so that's internal and external to the company, what's offered there, and then ultimately that's all wrapped together with the culture. All of those aspects create sort of the company culture, how things are dealt with, how things are day to day, what people's experience is working at that company. So ultimately that's what we look at, that's the basis of the audit, looking at those 6 factors. And giving the companies a report back on that.
So Sarah, on how does a company obtain those results? Well, how do they get the baseline? What's the process?
Yeah, so there's two main elements to the audit itself. So there's a review with the companies. That starts with a meeting. Whoever's taking responsibility for the workplace wellbeing audit within the company, it could be the CEO, managing director, it could be their HR director, whoever that is. And the point of that meeting is really to understand from the business perspective what they have in place around wellbeing. So it will focus on those 6 factors still. We'll be looking at the different policies that are in place, how processes run, so performance review processes, how people get feedback, what the management structure's like, those sorts of things, job descriptions in place, all of that. And then from there we'll agree comms out to the business, so what that should look like for their company, what timing is right. As Cass just said, it's important that if you're asking people to from a wellbeing perspective as well, if you're asking people to complete a survey, it's not a real crunch point for the business that you might have to wait a couple of weeks, which is what we did with Cass to make sure that people didn't feel overwhelmed with another piece of work. So we'll agree on the comms piece, and then a survey goes out to all employees and asks them again a number of questions based on those 6 factors. It takes about 15 minutes for employees to complete. So what we're doing there is we're getting the business perspective of sort of the well-being in the workplace, and we're also getting the employee perspective. What we do then is analyse all of those results and go into detail on each of those 6 factors which I mentioned before, and let companies know how they're doing it against each one of those. So where are their strength areas and where are the room for improvement on each one of those. And then ultimately we create a report, and part of that report is a roadmap for the next 6 to 12 months where we believe they will have the most impact if they focus on these areas so that they can improve workplace wellbeing.
Perfect.
That was a whistle-stop tour there.
Brilliant.
And Sarah, if so for example, Cass is a great example at GV Health. The report came out and they want to implement those changes themselves. Can they do so? Do they need additional help from Humph at all? What's the ideal in terms of the output of the report?
So it's completely up to them. So the roadmap will give them sort of a summary of the key areas to focus on. So for example, if leadership, for example, was the top one, then there'd be some details around leadership in terms of what those steps would be. And then it's up to them if they take that themselves in-house, if they've already got an HR team or somebody that can take that forward for them, a wellbeing champion, then that's absolutely fine, or we can support them and roll that out for them.
Brilliant. Thank you. So Cass and the GV Health team were our first guinea pigs for the Workplace Wellbeing Audit. So they took part in our first ever audit, and we rolled it out as exactly as Sarah's just explained. So Cass, I'm gonna come over to you, and and ask you how it went down. How you spoke to the fact that Sarah explained it really well to you, so you knew what was happening, but overall with the team when it was introduced to them, how what was the response from the team?
Oh, very good. I mean, very difficult to actually, because Sarah was managing it. We didn't really. I'd explained to them that this would be coming out, and it was for their benefit, and that it was anonymous. And that's one thing that I think is very important to get the best feedback. And I think that probably next time I think there were a couple of people who said to me after the event that they said, "Oh, I didn't realise it was anonymous." So I was like, right, this is interesting. So maybe next time we'll get some, I don't know. But anyway, as I said, 23 out of 26 responded. And I think they found very simple to follow. We took quite a long time to come back with any findings because we were actually taking the time to implement a lot of the changes and new policies like the neurodivergent and the menopause policy. So there was a lot of work going on behind the scenes, and there were a lot of things that we'd actioned during this time as well, like things like benefits such as buying and selling more holiday. So actually a lot of things were going, but in fact in terms of having the chance to tell everybody about it, we took probably longer than we would next time round, but being the first time that we've ever done it, it was quite a learning curve for us too. But overall, really, really great response, I felt. Welcomed.
Any surprises at all that came out of the report for you or for the wider leadership team?
No, I don't think so. Excuse me. The only thing that was interesting, and Sarah had warned me about this, was the business of sometimes you will get the odd extreme response. So, for example, I mean, as I said, we work a hybrid working system where sort of 3 days generally in the office, which you can choose, and then 2 days at home. And for someone who is going to say, because there's always going to be someone who says, well, I want to work 100% from home, you're like, okay, I'm probably not, I'm going to park that one because we're always going to get that. And like anything, it's never going to be 100%, I don't think, in that respect. But no real surprise. I didn't feel there were any surprises. Remember, I don't. I was looking through it the other day again, and I don't think there were any great surprises. there've been some challenges, but there haven't been any great surprises.
It is important to say that actually the result for GP Health was a really positive one across the board, which was lovely to see. There are things that we can do within it, which we'll come to. But
Absolutely.
yeah, but the general output from it was a positive one. So moving on to the challenges, Cass, what were the challenges of
I think
for this?
I mean, funnily enough, all the feedback that we got and the sort of where people had sort of written a bit more than just a one-liner,
Yeah.
we were able to deal with. And the one that really, for me, it was a major we needed to address was the bit of, coming back to this open plan office scenario, is of office gossip, which is an interesting one. And that one we have addressed. And firstly, when I reported it back to I presented it to the heads of departments, first of all, and said, this is where we're at, and this is what it's looking like. And actually, as my heads of department, I'm sort of expecting you to also be aware of this and to try and deal with this, because obviously there's an element of sometimes people either don't understand the etiquette within an open plan office, and so there's chat going on, or people are saying things and not realising that someone's hearing it, or in fact quite the reverse, when you say something and assume that because you're an open plan office everyone knows everything. So it's I think that was the thing that was most which came across strongly for us, and in fact has been the biggest impact and has had the biggest feedback, because when I then did a session for people to drop in to go through it all, I think that Sarah, I think you certainly had some good feedback from some of the team saying, oh, that was really good. I'm really glad that's been addressed. So I'm glad that the one thing that I felt very strongly about has we've moved it forward. So that's been really good.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good example as well of how every company is so individual that you can't do it as a catch-all, because every company will have these small nuances that impact people, but you might never know about it if, depending on how people talk or what they share. So yeah, I think interesting.
No, hugely useful, that one.
And Cash, you've referenced some of the things that have been introduced since the audit, but what have we? I know the answer, but what have you introduced as a result of the audit?
So we've we've talked about, there was things like introducing water coolers and fruit available to all. We've also done actioned, which was actually in April, I think, so very soon after the whole audit, buying and selling of more holiday. We also have put in place, we all went, the SLT and the management team, heads departments, all went on a neurodivergent course, which was incredible. And I am already seeing the impact on the heads of departments in particular, on how they're handling some of their team and managing them, and recognising now key points, where you sit there and you think, ooh, that's superb. I mean, really good. So we've got a neurodivergent policy, menopause policy, which we've not only goes into our handbook, but is also separately on the portal for everyone so that they can easily find it. My mind's gone blank. Hang on, I've got the whole list here. We did a lot.
We introduced a new mental health benefit, didn't we? With Spill.
Yes, Spills, yeah, which has been, that's gone down very, very well. Really great. They want to see more of Sarah. I can't think why. They wanted more HR present. Absolutely right. They want to know the person they're talking to, and I get it. So actually, but actually, to be fair, I don't think you come in every month. So, but I don't know what. Yeah, they like you.
God knows.
The neurodiversity and sort of understanding. The training was really requested, and we've done an awful lot of coaching this year, particularly with heads departments and anybody who's we feel we've wanted to. So it has brought an awful lot of things, and actually what's so lovely is that it's actually, when we reported it back to the main company, we could say, we've done this, we're doing this is in play, you'll have seen this has happened, and it did go down well. The only thing that was interesting was the question that came up was, how often are you going to do this? And I said, well, we were looking at doing it annually, and I've had one or two people saying, could you do it more often? And I said, well, we can, but you've also got to take into consideration, we want solid feedback, as opposed to if you're doing this more than once or twice a year, I don't know that you're really, there comes a point where I just don't know whether you're really going to gain a huge amount. I'm taking that on board very much, because it was very interesting that was asked. But I think you've also got to, I mean, if people go, oh, no, I don't want it. This is, I'm really pleased.
They get fatigue, surveys of fatigue.
I don't want to, because it's been so well received and has achieved so much within our business that I would really want to, I think, leave it to sort of do it again. We did March, didn't we, Sarah? Yeah, we did March. I think we did, if I remember rightly. No, I can't remember. I've slept since then. I don't know.
Gosh, anyway. That long ago as well.
Well, I know
it was March.
But what I've learned, we'll do it in March next year, 2025, and we wouldn't take so long to report back. And I think that starts to become the norm. And as I keep saying to everybody, you don't need to wait till you have an audit. If you've got some thoughts, please come back, go to your line manager, talk to Sarah, whatever it might be. But actually, this is still the best way to get the best information out of people, I think, because they go, brilliant, it's given me a tick to carry on and write this down, as opposed to, I want to go and talk to my line manager about this and I'm feeling a bit awkward.
One of the
can feel a bit
I
formal.
mentioned there about the report actually was that we give a score to each of the factor areas.
That's right.
And sort of do them on a RAG basis, so red, amber, green, against those scores, so that it gives you an idea first time round of what you're doing, but when you come to do the audit for a second time, hopefully you've implemented some of the recommendations that you can actually see where you've made a difference. So against each one of those factors there'll be a new score, and you'll see whether hopefully that things have overall, so there's an overall score, and then broken down by factors as well, so it's got a really nice measure against it, and so that you can clearly see.
Yes, we've got a starting point. I'm very proud of our 81% overall.
You should be.
I am very proud of that. And we've still got way to, there's improvement to be made, but I still think I was very pleased with that.
No, you absolutely should be.
It's got to improve on it next year.
Well, the higher it is, the harder it is, right? As with all maths. Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, ladies. Cass, thanks for joining us and talking to us about GV Health and the Workplace Wellbeing Audit. Thank you very much, Sarah and Lisa. I will leave it there. If anybody's interested in talking to us further about the Workplace Wellbeing Audit, then please do jump onto the website or reach out to Lisa or myself. Thank you very much, ladies.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.